Down goes Bolsonaro. Probably. In the election, at least, he did lose. All hail the new king. Lula actually made it happen. President Jair Bolsonaro has been rejected. And isn't it nice in 2022 to see fascism lose, at least somewhere else? It might not happen here, but we'll see. Now, Lula squeaked out this victory. It was 50.9% to 49.1%. And I don't want to like spoil the good times. This is good news, and we're gonna have fun talking about this. But I don't want fascism to lose by a percentage point. I would love for it to be a little bit wider of a gap there, especially when fascism is coming equipped with an endless amount of things to say about voter fraud and elections being rigged. And many of Bolsonaro's followers will believe for the rest of their lives that Lula somehow from out of power stole the election. It won't make any sense, but they'll believe it. And they'll be willing to do terrible, terrible things because of that belief. But for now, democracy has prevailed. And you can see Lula tweeting about it. We're gonna give you more reactions coming from world leaders, past and present, in a bit. But let's acknowledge that this is a massive comeback for Lula. He'd been the president, he'd gone to prison for nearly 600 days over corruption charges that were eventually vacated after a judge said that the judges that tried him were biased, and now returning and winning. In fact, this is the first time an incumbent president has failed to win re-election in the 34 years of Brazil's modern democracy. So it was a tough one to come back from. Bearing in mind that the last time he was president, he left with an approval rating of 80%, which seems impossible in the American context. We'll see how he can do with the very different situation Brazil finds itself in now. But anyway, there were a lot of fears that this could turn out much worse. And there is still the possibility that that will happen. Not only that Bolsonaro might win, but that he might refuse to admit that he's lost. He had, in advance of the election, been talking about how the nation's electronic voting machines were rife with fraud. He brought, to buttress that point, the same sort of evidence you might expect from a live stream that Mike Lindell puts together or something. He talked about, his supporters possibly helping him remain in power. He had said last year that there are only 3 outcomes to this election. He either wins, he's killed, or he's arrested, and then added, "Tell the bastards I'll never be arrested." Well, he didn't win, so I guess we'll see. He has yet to actually put out a statement acknowledging that he has lost. Many of his supporters, like actually in elected office, seem to be accepting it. I will let you know that while the voting was going on, there was also cause for concern about how this might go. Federal highway agents apparently stopped hundreds of buses that were carrying voters to the polls and questioned the people in them, including in regions largely supportive of Mr. Da Silva. You might have seen allegations about this throughout the day. So that is super suspicious. Now, apparently all of the buses did end up making it to the polling places. Still very weird behavior. I believe we have Dan back though. Dan, what do you think?
What you said there in the beginning, that it is a little bit concerning that fascism only lost by a percentage point. No, hate to break it to you, fascism was the incumbent, right? Like that was what people were picking in the beginning, right? And that's stones in glass houses. That's what we had with Trump. And I was kind of annoyed with some of the tropical Trump parallels that were made by American media when describing Bolsonaro, because as I was describing on Power Report, my show where I talked with a Brazilian recently on this thing, so you can check it out, youtube.com/Dan from the internet after this. But that Brazil is just, and Bolsonaro are everything that Trump was doing, all the stuff that he was flirting around with, meddling in the election, but times 100. You had actual deputy of police chasing after at gunpoint a Lula supporter who said something as innocuous as, "Tomorrow Lula will win." All right, these are people. There was expected, unfortunately, for there to be a widespread violence, people protesting the election in this case. But thankfully, it seems like people are accepting that Lula has won. This is part of what Bernie Sanders was talking about a couple months ago when he was arguing in Senate that for this Brazilian election, we need to certify that the democratically elected president of Brazil, whoever that may be, is the one the United States supports. In the event that Bolsonaro does something like this, where he tries to subvert the will of the Brazilian people. So hopefully that doesn't happen. We're in for another couple of months, similarly to the American system, where around January, we'll see Lula will actually get sworn in. But until then, Bolsonaro could get up to some weird tricks. We all have to keep a really close eye on this. But let's just relish in a moment, John. Good news in the world. Good news in the world. Wow.
I know, it feels weird. And like, I can be a little bit frustrated that it's not wholly pure in that he hasn't actually resigned it. We don't know exactly how this is gonna go, although it seems like power's gonna be transferred, probably. And also, I don't wanna have that knee-jerk reaction where it's like, okay, this is good, but how is it actually bad? But that's just the feeling that I have had beaten into me over the past few years, I guess. But that said, I want to enjoy this, Dan. I want to enjoy this, that fascism, despite being the incumbent, as you point out, has failed. That a good guy who actually seems to care about Brazilians is gonna be in charge once again.
Check out the Damage Report podcast each day, wherever you get your podcasts, whether Pocket Casts or Stitcher or iTunes. You can join me as I give you the news and stories you want, with a range of co-hosts and interview guests jumping in on the fun each day. Again, that's the Damage Report, wherever you get your podcasts. And if you get them at iTunes, don't forget to rate and review. Sometimes I'll read them live on the show.